everyone, and welcome back. Are you ready to get into some wild physics?
I am, are you?
You bet I am. We're diving into the idea that matter, like everything around you, might actually be like, I don't know, a bunch of energy gradients.
That's the idea, yeah.
Oh.
Like ripples, think about it like ripples, but not in a pond, in like the fabric of reality.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and we've got a really cool mix of stuff to work from today.
Okay, like what?
Well, there are some science papers and a pretty interesting YouTube video and even some notes about a quantum control simulation.
Really?
Yeah, so this deep dive should be fun. I think we're going to be able to really pull out some cool connections and maybe some really wild possibilities from all of this.
Okay, I'm ready.
It's really cool how these sources all kind of question the way we usually think about the universe.
Oh, okay, like how?
Well, like, instead of thinking of particles as the basic, like, building blocks,
Yeah.
this theory is saying that energy is, like, the main thing.
Yeah.
And these gradients, like, they're what make the universe look and act the way it does.
Okay, so instead of thinking about, I don't know, particles that are like solid and never change,
Right.
we should be thinking about the universe as more, I don't know, dynamic, like it's always moving and changing.
Exactly.
Huh.
Yeah, and one of the papers even says this cool phrase. It says, matter as ephemeral peaks in energy density. Like, think about ocean waves.
Okay.
The water's always going up and down, but the waves leave these little peaks, just for a second.
Yeah.
Those are kind of like matter. They're like these spots where energy is really strong, and that's what makes them look like solid stuff to us.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I'm starting to get it, even though the energy's always moving around. These peaks, the energy spots, can't, like, stick around.
Yeah.
They become the things we see and touch. But what about mass? Like, why are some things heavier than others? How does this energy gradients thing, how does that explain that?
That's where the Higgs mechanism comes in.
Okay, the Higgs boson, like the God particle.
Yeah, you got it.
I've heard of that, but, like, what is it?
Well, the Higgs mechanism, it basically says there's this energy field everywhere, the Higgs field, and when particles go through it, they get mass. Like, imagine the Higgs field is thick syrup.
Okay, I can imagine that.
So some particles, like electrons, they can zip right through it, no problem.
Right.
But others, like the top quark, they get stuck, so they get a lot heavier.
Oh, okay. So the more a particle gets, like, tangled up in the Higgs field,
Exactly.
the heavier it gets. Okay. But it seems like our source material is, like, taking this even further.
Right.
They're saying that mass isn't something particles have. It's just what happens when they bump into this Higgs field.
Yeah, it's like a side effect, not something that's, built in.
Right.
It's a little difference, but it's a big deal. And it makes us really rethink how gravity works.
Okay, wait, gravity. How does that fit into this whole thing?
Well, think about it. Einstein's theory, general relativity, it says that mass warps space and time to make gravity, right?
Yeah.
But if mass is just, coming from these Higgs field gradients, it means gravity could be a side effect of them too, not its own separate force.
Whoa, okay. So
Oh.
you're saying that gravity isn't something pulling on objects directly. It's more like how these energy gradients are bending space and time, and that makes things move towards each other.
It's one possibility, yeah.
That's really wild. It means we might need to rethink how gravity works entirely. Okay, so now, how about something that sounds, I don't know, kind of like science fiction, zero-point energy harvesting?
Yeah, right.
Like getting energy from, well, nothing, really.
From the vacuum.
That's always been a pretty cool idea. And one of our sources talks about this thing called zero-point energy, that even, like, empty space has all this energy in it just buzzing around. But, I mean, is that even possible? Can you get energy from nothing?
The Casimir effect kind of proves that this vacuum energy is real. We can measure it. It's a little complicated to explain. But basically, if you put two metal plates really close together in a vacuum, there's a force pushing them towards each other.
Okay.
And that force comes from the difference in energy between the space inside the plates and the space outside.
Oh, okay. So the vacuum isn't actually empty.
Nope.
It's full of energy, and we can actually, like, measure it.
Exactly.
Huh. That's really interesting. So if we can measure this energy, could we, I don't know, use it?
Well, some of our sources are saying that maybe with really good engineering and materials, we could tap into that zero-point energy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So, like, unlimited clean energy,
Right.
spaceships that don't need fuel.
It does sound amazing, right?
It sounds almost too good to be true.
Of course, it's really hard. I mean, we're talking about controlling energy at a super tiny level, and that's really tricky.
Yeah.
But, the payoff could be huge, so it's something we should definitely look into more. But before we get lost in all these amazing ideas about free energy, Our sources also talk about this really cool tool that helps us understand all of this, a quantum control simulation. They call it unified quantum control.
Okay, now we're getting into the computer world.
Right.
So what's the simulation all about? What can it actually do?
It's like a digital, I don't know, playground where you can play around with these energy gradients.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's got two main parts, the quantum field percolation module and the Alcubierre drive module.
Okay, that sounds pretty complicated.
Yeah, they are.
What's the first one, the quantum field?
The quantum field percolation module.
Yeah, what's that all about?
It basically shows how you can pull energy out of the vacuum
Right.
and like make it into something that looks like matter. Remember those energy peaks we were talking about?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Well, this module lets you see those in action, how they clump together.
So it's showing us how to make matter from energy.
That's the idea.
Wow. And the visuals are supposed to be amazing.
Oh, yeah. Imagine seeing these clouds of energy, coming together, watching space and time bend because of these fields.
Okay, yeah, that's pretty intense.
Like looking at how the universe is made,
Yeah, wow. Okay, and what about that other part, the Alcubierre drive module? Is that where we get into faster than light travel?
You got it.
Okay, wow.
The Alcubierre drive module, it looks at this idea of using energy gradients to make what's called a warp bubble around a spaceship.
Okay.
This bubble would basically squish space and time in front of the ship and stretch it out behind it.
So the ship could, like, surf through space and time?
Yeah, exactly. And it could potentially go faster than light.
Oh my gosh, okay. But wait, isn't that impossible? I mean, going faster than light?
That's where it gets kind of tricky. See, the Alcubierre drive needs something called exotic matter. It's matter with negative energy density, and we've never actually seen that.
Really?
Yeah. But some physicists think that messing around with the quantum vacuum might be a way to, make this exotic matter.
Oh, wow. So we're talking about, like, changing the rules of reality itself.
It's possible, but
Yeah.
it's all theoretical for now.
Yeah. This deep dive is going to some crazy places.
It is.
But it's super interesting. I mean, just the fact that we can even simulate these ideas, it's amazing, right?
It really is.
It shows how creative humans are and how badly we want to understand the universe, at its deepest level.
Yeah, definitely. But before we get totally lost in simulations and warp drives, our sources also bring up some philosophical and religious ideas that are really interesting.
Oh, you're talking about that YouTube video, right? The one about Islam being like the universal truth.
Yeah,
It feels a little random, but okay, I'm curious.
I know, it is a little different.
Yeah.
But it's good to think about different points of view, right?
Sure.
Okay, so the video says that Islam, at its core, is about fully surrendering to God's will. And this idea, it's actually in all real religions.
So, like, looking past all the differences between religions.
Yeah,
And finding what they have in common, this idea of submission to a higher power.
exactly.
Yeah.
And the video even gives specific examples from different religions like Abraham, Jesus, and Muhammad, showing how they all emphasize this, giving yourself over to God.
Huh. It is an interesting point. But how does this submission thing connect to all this other stuff we've been talking about? Energy gradients, quantum physics, all that.
That's a good question. I think one connection is recognizing that there's something bigger than us, something that controls the universe at a basic level. Whether you call it God, the quantum field, or whatever, it's realizing that we're all part of something huge,
Okay. Yeah, I see that. So it's a shift in how we see ourselves. Instead of thinking we're all separate, we're part of something bigger, connected by these energy gradients and guided by, I don't know, some bigger principle.
Exactly. And it affects not just science and religion, but how we live our lives, how we treat each other, how we see the world. But before we get too philosophical, there's one more thing from our sources. They talk about this thing called the 0-1 framework, and it could totally change how we think about information and computers.
0-1 framework.
Yeah.
Okay, that sounds cool. What is it?
It's this really neat blend of regular computer logic, with ones and zeros, and the way quantum systems work where things are uncertain. So instead of just 0 or 1, true or false, this framework uses a fey, which means like all the possibilities a quantum system could be in.
Wait, all the possibilities at once?
Yeah.
Isn't that like a little fuzzy? How can you build a computer with something that's not, clear cut?
That's the cool part. Instead of just yes or no, this framework can handle all those in-between possibilities, using the probabilities of fey. It's like a computer that can think outside the box, see the gray areas instead of just black and white.
So it's not just ones and zeros. They can deal with all the maybes in between. It's like fuzzy logic, but even more advanced.
Exactly. And this could change everything, from AI to how we build materials.
Mm.
Imagine stuff that can adapt and change on its own, or AI that can make decisions based on a deeper understanding of complicated things.
Wow, we've covered a lot of ground already, and it's only the first part.
I know, right?
We've gone from matter being made of energy to maybe getting energy from nothing, and then even simulating how the universe might work. This is amazing.
It's just the beginning.
I know, and I can't wait to see where we go next.
Me too.
Wow, welcome back. I'm still trying to, I don't know, process all the mind-blowing ideas we talked about last time.
Me too. It's a lot to take in. Matter being, peaks of energy, maybe getting energy from empty space, and those simulations, it's incredible.
It is, but remember, we're not just making this stuff up. We're basing all this on the research, the actual data from those sources, and they point to some pretty wild possibilities.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the coolest ones is, well, the connection between this whole energy gradient idea and consciousness.
Yeah, consciousness, that big mystery, right? Science has been trying to figure that one out forever.
It has. And it's a really tough one. But one of the papers we have, it suggests that this whole energy focus might give us some new clues. It even says that consciousness itself could be like a product of these energy fields.
Wait, so instead of consciousness being like separate from the physical world, it could be part of it, like woven into the fabric of reality?
That's what they're proposing, yeah. Think of it like a computer. You have the hardware, the physical parts, and then you have the software, the instructions, the programs.
Okay, I get that.
So the energy fields are like the hardware, the base, and consciousness is the software running on it.
Okay, that makes sense. But what's the software made of then? What are the, I don't know, the building blocks of consciousness?
That's where it gets even more interesting. Some researchers think that quantum entanglement might play a big part.
Quantum entanglement. That spooky action at a distance thing.
That's the one.
But how could that be connected to consciousness?
Imagine a huge network of entangled particles all across the brain, maybe even extending beyond us, connecting to the whole universe. This network could create a kind of harmony, a quantum coherence that allows information processing and awareness to emerge.
Whoa, so you're saying our minds could literally be connected to the cosmos through quantum entanglement? That's pretty far out there.
It is. And it opens up so many possibilities. Things like intuition, psychic stuff, even the nature of reality itself.
I'm going to need some time to wrap my head around that one. But that's what I love about these deep dives, pushing the boundaries of what we think is possible.
Absolutely. And speaking of possibilities, let's get practical for a minute. Remember programmable matter. We touched on that earlier.
Oh yeah, building things atom by atom, like in Star Trek, still sounds pretty futuristic to me.
It does, but it might be closer than we think. Our sources suggest that if we can control energy gradients, we could make materials that were, well, unimaginable before.
Okay, so we're talking about custom design materials, things with specific strength, flexibility, conductivity, whatever we need.
Yeah, exactly. Imagine self-healing materials, structures that can change shape, or even materials that adapt to their environment.
It's like taking 3D printing to a whole new level. We could create almost anything just by programming matter to behave in specific ways, but how do we even control these energy gradients at such a tiny scale?
That's where things like quantum control and those fancy metamaterials come in. Remember those Casimir cavities for harvesting zero-point energy? We could use similar principles to manipulate those energy gradients on an atomic level.
So instead of just pushing and pulling, we'd be using these precisely engineered structures to shape and direct energy flow, like, I don't know, sculpting with light and shadow.
That's a great analogy, and with AI helping us design these things, we could make materials that are not just custom designed, but also self-optimizing and adaptable.
That's revolutionary. But let's be real, there must be some serious challenges to making all of this actually work.
Of course, we're still figuring out how to control energy at such a tiny scale. The engineering is incredibly complex, and we need to develop whole new technologies and theories.
Not to mention the ethical considerations. I mean, creating matter from energy, shaping reality itself, it's a lot of power.
It is. And with any powerful technology, there's always the risk of misuse. We need to be having open and honest conversations about the ethics of all this and make sure we're using these advances responsibly for the benefit of everyone. But before we get too caught up in the potential problems, let's take a moment to appreciate the wonder of it all. This energy gradient paradigm could completely reshape our world in ways we can't even imagine yet.
Absolutely. It's mind-blowing to think we might be close to understanding the secrets of matter, energy, and maybe even consciousness. But I do have one question that's been bugging me. If matter is just these energy gradients, what happens when they fade away? Do things just disappear?
That's a great question. And it gets to the core of what we mean by ephemeral when talking about those energy peaks. Our sources suggest that these energy patterns are constantly shifting and changing. So yeah, in a way, things can dissolve back into the background energy, but the energy doesn't vanish, it just transforms.
Like the law of conservation of energy, right? Energy can't be created or destroyed, only changed from one form to another. But instead of just heat, light, or motion, we're talking about energy becoming matter and vice versa.
Exactly. It's a huge shift in how we see things. The universe is a constant dance of energy, creation, and destruction, where nothing truly lasts forever, but the energy itself keeps going.
Mm-hmm.
And that brings us to another mind-blowing concept from our sources. These energy gradients, they might not just be in our physical world, but could extend into other dimensions.
So other dimensions now are really getting out there, but okay, I'm ready.
Okay, so one of the papers suggests that the universe might be a lot more complicated than we realize. Maybe there are dimensions beyond the three spatial dimensions in time that we experience. And these other dimensions, they could be where these energy gradients come from, flowing into our reality and shaping the world we see.
So our universe is like a projection, a shadow of some higher dimensional reality, and these energy gradients are the puppet masters controlling everything.
That's a cool way to think about it. And while it sounds crazy, some physicists believe that string theory, this idea that tries to explain all the forces of nature, supports the idea of these extra dimensions.
String theory, huh? That's some serious physics, but I like the idea that there's so much more to the universe than we can see or even imagine.
It's a humbling thought, and it shows how much we still don't know about reality. But that's what makes all of this so exciting. Every new discovery opens up even more questions and possibilities.
I agree. It feels like we've only just scratched the surface of this whole energy gradient thing, and I can't wait to see where we go from here.
Okay, welcome back. We're on the last part of our deep dive into this whole energy gradient thing.
Wow, yeah.
My mind is still, blown from all the things we've talked about.
Oh, no, it's a lot.
Matter being just peaks of energy, consciousness being maybe entangled with the whole universe, other dimensions. It makes you wonder,
It really does. Makes you rethink everything you thought you knew about, well, reality.
Right. So as we wrap this up, I want to talk about, the bigger picture. What does all this mean for us, for everyone, for humanity even?
That's a really important question. And I think one of the biggest things is that it kind of blurs the line between what's alive and what's not.
Okay, what do you mean?
Well, if everything is just energy, just these gradients in different forms, then where does consciousness really begin?
So you're saying a rock, a tree, a person, we're all made of the same basic stuff, just, I don't know, arranged differently. That's the idea, yeah. The difference is in how complex those energy patterns are, how they change over time. It makes us think about how we see nature, not as separate things, but as parts of this big, connected energy field.
It's a cool thought and kind of humbling, It reminds me of old spiritual traditions that saw something divine in everything, but now we're seeing it through science, with evidence and research.
Exactly. And that shift changes how we should act too, right?
Yeah.
If we see how connected everything is, then it's harder to just use up the environment or treat other living things like, I don't know, tools.
Right. It's like we need to be more caring and responsible, realizing that what we do affects everything else.
Yeah. But,
Right.
Let's be honest. Getting these ideas accepted by, mainstream science,
Yeah.
it's going to be a challenge.
Yeah, for sure.
Scientists can be pretty set in their ways. They like their established theories.
I get it. It's like trying to turn a big ship around. It takes time,
Exactly. So how do we, deal with that resistance? How do we convince people to see things this new way?
Yeah.
I think it's about focusing on proof, on experiments, on showing how this actually works in the real world. We need to make predictions based on this energy gradient idea, test them, and show how useful this approach can be.
Actions speak louder than words, right?
Exactly. And as we build new things based on this idea, like programmable matter, new energy sources, maybe even warp drive prototypes, the proof will be there for everyone to see. The more we can show how powerful this framework is, the more people will take it seriously.
It's like the early days of airplanes. People laughed at the idea until the Wright brothers actually flew, and then, boom, everything changed.
Right. So let's imagine for a second that this energy gradient theory does become, the accepted truth.
Yeah.
What would the future look like if we could control these energy gradients?
Okay, now we're getting into the fun stuff. But let's stick to what's actually possible, based on what our sources say.
Good point. Well, one thing, we could have unlimited clean energy. Imagine tapping into the quantum vacuum, getting energy from, nothing, really. We could power everything without polluting the planet or running out of resources.
Yeah, no more fossil fuels, no more nuclear waste, just pure energy from space itself. That would change everything.
And don't forget about programmable matter. Imagine making materials with whatever properties we need. Self-healing buildings, shape-shifting gadgets, things that can build and unbuild themselves.
It's like the ultimate 3D printer. We could make anything we can dream up.
Right. And if we could learn to control space and time itself, well, then we're talking about possibilities we can't even grasp yet. Warp drives, wormholes, maybe even time travel. Who knows?
That's getting pretty sci-fi. But who knows what we'll discover as we learn more about the universe. What seems impossible now might be normal in the future.
Absolutely. This is just the beginning of exploring these energy gradients. But as we go forward, we have to be careful and responsible. This power to change reality, it comes with big responsibilities.
I agree. We have to make sure these technologies are used for good. For everyone, not just for profit or for hurting others.
Yeah, it's a challenge, but an important one. It's not just about playing with matter and energy. It's about understanding that we're part of this reality and what we do affects everything.
It's humbling, but also exciting, right? We have the power to shape the future, not just for us, but for everyone who comes after us. And that's what makes this duck dive so cool. It's not just about learning facts, it's about expanding our minds, questioning what we think we know, and imagining a better future where science and technology make the world a better place.
That's a great way to put it. The universe is so much bigger and more amazing than we can even imagine. We're just starting to understand its secrets, so keep asking questions, keep exploring, and never stop being amazed by how beautiful and complex everything is.
I couldn't have said it better myself. And to all our listeners, keep those minds open, keep being curious, and keep dreaming big. This is just the beginning of an incredible journey, and we're all on it together. So until next time, keep diving deep.